Today we're diving into Hitachi's second generation 4K Ultra HD camera with John Humphrey. Welcome, John. So tell us a little bit about the camera.
Our new camera is our second generation 4K camera, and it continues the tradition of Hitachi's, price performance value camera. It uses all the latest technology because it's a brand new camera, just came out for this NAB. What that means is it uses CMOS global shutter imagers. It's the latest native 4K sensors. It's a 3 2/3 inch prism camera. So because of that, it has very good color. It's very difficult for a single sensor Bayer filter to match the kind of color that you can get on a prism type camera. The expanded spectral range in the prism as well as the sensors allow the camera to do full BT 2020 wide color gamut. Everybody says they do BT 2020 wide color. They don't really. They do DCI P3 or something less than 2020 because that's very difficult to achieve, and only a handful of monitors can even display BT 2020. But we do it. And you have to have special chips to shoot in order to see it go all the way to the edges of wide color gamut. We have separate controls for hybrid log gamma and for standard dynamic range. But I think what I mentioned earlier was one of the most important things, and one of the things that people pass without realizing the importance, is the digital signal processing. After it comes out of the imager, it's just kind of analog mush until it gets through the digital processing where all the real work takes place. And so the digital signal processing in this camera is the latest advanced signal processing. It achieves a tremendous signal to noise ratio equal to or better than HD cameras. And that's really saying something for any 4K cameras because the pixel wells are smaller, the ability to store the photons is less, and it's more and more difficult to achieve really good signal to noise ratio. And we do. So, and of course that future processing is also there for upgrades to the digital signal processing in the future. We also have the standard 2/3 inch prism type camera, 3-chip. So industry standard B4 lenses are easy to use on this camera. No adapter is required like some other cameras.
So from our previous conversations, you said this camera is really well adapted for low light situations, house of worship, maybe live events. Talk about how you see people putting this camera into action.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Dak, because the other side of signal to noise is high sensitivity. And high sensitivity is what you need in low light situations. So this camera is ideal for places like concert halls, like symphony concert halls, where the light level is low. Certainly houses of worship where the light level is low. These are ideal for this camera. Of course, it's also good for broadcasters and studio production because you don't have to have a lot of light on the set or on the talent. So it works for there as well.
So when you say the camera is better than HD at signal processing, talk a little bit about what that means in practice.
The digital signal processing that I focused on earlier is all about the signal to noise. But the other part of digital signal processing is a huge range of adjustments that are possible in a sophisticated camera with advanced digital signal processing. And that covers the entire range from just simple things like high dynamic range, but it also includes things like skin tone detail, multi-skin tone detail, matrix adjustments to the colors. There's so much power in this digital signal processing that you have a lot of handles on the picture.
How is this camera with technologies like Ultra HD and 4K future-proofed investment for buyers?
Well, obviously, we're going to 4K. It's just a matter of time. We're talking about 8K. We have 8K cameras for NHK. I think that's a little ways off, but 4K is really here. As it relates to broadcasters, until next gen TV or ATSC3, they're not going to be able to do 4K. They're not going to be able to do high dynamic range. They can't even do 1080p. So for the time being, broadcasters might consider 4K cameras for archive, for future use. In the case of production studios, even houses of worship, a higher performance camera, higher resolution pictures, will look better even when they pass through streaming. And I should mention, one of the advantages of houses of worship is, and this also applies to like events, because after all, a church service is a live event. But this applies where you have control of the camera and you also have control of the display. Once you have control of both, you can kind of do what you want. You're not limited by ATSC, for example. So if you have HDR capable displays, then you can use the higher resolution and the HDR wider gamut on those displays. So 4K, wide color gamut, and high dynamic range would look better today on big screens that are capable of handling that.
So, John, what else do folks need to know?
The 3 2/3 inch prism cameras have evolved over a very long period of time. And part of that evolution is not just all of the adjustments on the picture, as I discussed under the digital signal processing, awkwardly, but more than that, there is a range of capabilities that include teleprompter and local power and a single fiber cable for everything the camera needs. You see these cameras with big bundles of jury-rigged cables, and all of that stuff is included in real cameras, and then let me make that clear. I said right in the beginning, this is for events, live events. That's the kind of camera this is. Oh, of course you can record it. But if you're doing a live event, whether it's Jim Gaffigan on stage, the Rolling Stones, or a church service, a live or recorded church service, no camera does a better job than these kinds of cameras. So our position is for those kinds of events, no camera is better. Can you press a camera into service that wasn't really intended to do that, and it's a little bit of a force fit? Of course. And that's something that I have sort of a hot button about personally. I grew up on mobile trucks with these kinds of cameras. And I guess I'd say I believe in these kinds of cameras. They have their place, and they are being displaced sometimes by people who want to try something cheap. And it's unfortunate. Most of the time when you buy the wrong camera, you don't want to admit it. And so they just kind of live with it. And I hope that the word will get out that it was a nice idea to do single sensor cameras that are little consumer crossover plastic cameras, but it really didn't work out in the long run, and you get what you pay for.
So the supply chain has obviously thrown a wrench in many people's plans this year, but what is the availability for the camera and what's the pricing?
Our products have always been value priced. It's a price performance value that Hitachi has hung their hat on from the very beginning, and this camera is no exception. You need to talk to our sales force to get the exact prices on the camera. But it's available now. We have a couple of dozen orders in-house now, and the deliveries will begin after the NAB in May. The camera is just coming off the assembly line at this point, and the orders are coming in already.
So for folks who are wanting to learn more about the camera, where should they head?
Well, obviously, you go to www.hitachikokusai.com or .us, either one works, and that takes you to our website. When you use that URL, you'll go to the landing page, which has our 4 most popular products. And of course, the SK-UHD7000 is right there. And from there, you can go to anywhere on the website.
Well, John, thanks for joining me today on this Newscast Studio Product Spotlight to talk about Hitachi's second generation Ultra HD 4K camera, and we'll be looking for it in the field.